Kamala Harris is a card-carrying communist, and it seems like Tim Walz is as well, and that's problematic for, the free world. And if you elect a communist leader to the leadership position of the leader of the free world, what do you think happens after that? Yikes. So we'll examine the US and the UK at the end of the show, because there's a whole bunch of things going on with that. And I was right. I called it. And Nenshi, when the NDP, before Nenshi entered the race, they had something like 15,000 total. And I think that's even probably high, total members. And Nenshi had 60,000 people vote for him. So if you just completely flood the membership with all of these people and none of them are real, I mean, do you really win the membership, or do you really win the leadership? So did Nenshi really win? I'm not sure, but it seems like Kian Bext has done some interesting investigative work and has found out that Nenshi and the membership numbers were inflated, and Elections Canada is involved. So that's interesting. I've got that news later in the show. And we're going to start with the Coutts 4. The Coutts 4 are still in custody despite having a not guilty verdict returned for them. And the Crown wants to return to prosecuting them because they think that the jury got it wrong. So they're going to appeal, and they want to keep them in jail, which is absolutely incredible. So these poor men are being held as political prisoners. Did you think that Canada was capable of that? Well, have I got news for you, right? There's lots to get to. Let's get to it first. We're starting with Coutts. And Marco says, Alberta justice strikes again. Where's Danielle Smith in all this, right? Like, you've got a not guilty return from a jury of the peers, and they're still in jail, and Danielle Smith is crickets. The AG is crickets, right? Unbelievable. Anyway, Crown prosecutors working for Alberta Justice are appealing the acquittal of Chris Carabay and Tony Olenek on the charge of conspiracy to kill RCMP officers. The decision comes before the men have been sentenced. This decision sets precedent in the travesty that these proceedings have been from the start. There was always the possibility of an appeal by the Crown, but the rate this appeal has been filed is unheard of. Later this month, the Crown will likely attempt everything possible to keep these men remanded in custody. The courts have been weaponized. Murderers, rapists, and dangerous repeat offenders get bail daily, while political dissidents are jailed and dragged through the courts. Even a jury of our peers is no longer credible enough to stop the warfare being executed by Stephen Johnson and his cronies. So that's pretty scary, right? Like, you've got a jury decision, return not guilty, and the government says, we know they're guilty though, so we're just going to keep them in jail and hope that you get tired of fighting us on this. What happens when you elect a head of state who's a communist? What happens, do you think? Robert says the Crown, sorry, I said that already. The Crown is appealing the acquittal of Chris Carabay and Anthony Olenek on the charge of conspiracy to murder. The two men were found not guilty by a jury on August 3rd in Lethbridge, Alberta. Both Carabay and Olenek received letters from the Crown on this matter today. So they've been in prison since the 3rd, still in as far as I understand it, the same remand custody jail cell that they've been in for 900 plus days. And they had to wait 13 days, almost 2 weeks, for a letter that says, oh, by the way, we're going to appeal this and you're not going anywhere. Unbelievable. Maxime Bernier is responding to this. This news is truly awful. The police fabricated stories to help the Liberals use this case to justify their illegal invocation of the Emergencies Act. And now the Crown wants to reverse the jury's not guilty verdict and continue persecuting these innocent men. The corruption is deep. Yeah, very, very deep. David is responding to Gord. Gord says, in a move that should surprise no one, the government is appealing the not guilty verdict on the Coutts men. And David says, my belief, I thought this was a very plausible reason for the government doing this. The government is making a move. It's a calculated move. Why would they do this? Because they acted in a way that is, outside the law, illegal. They acted in a way that targeted these men, and they did things like held them in custody and remand for 900 days. They did a whole bunch of things that they don't want culpability for. The other two took a plea bargain. Probably part of the plea bargain is be quiet, right? And I mean, maybe there are holes in that. I think that one of the men has been testifying, but regardless of that, this holds water for me. My belief, says David, is that this is the Crown's attempt to scare the effing shit out of these two men to force a plea that causes them to be gagged for the rest of their lives and not be able to sue for malicious prosecution, with the goal to cover this entire debacle up. If I was facing an appeal that would cause me to face 20 years in jail, I'm signing the plea deal on the second time around and saying thank you very much you guys. So yeah, like part of the art of the deal is you ask for something super, super egregious, right? Like, I want $20 million to work for you. And they're like, well, $20 million? And you're like, yeah, 20 million bucks. That's what I want. And they're like, wow, okay, hold on. Like, we have to talk about that. And then they come back and they say, well, we can't do that. And you're like, it's okay. I've decided as well that I only want $150,000. And they're like, oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. We could do $150,000 down from $20 million. Like, that sounds like a deal. It's the same mental trick, right? You ask for something that you know you're not going to get, right? Like, you know, they're not going to give you $20 million, probably, right? 25 million, I meant. If they agree readily to the 20 million, you've gone too low. So, you know, the first one's going to be rejected, and your goal was never the first one. The first one was supposed to be such a big number. It got shock as a response, right? And then the real goal was the second number, right? I just want $150,000. Whereas if you come in and say, I want $150,000, you might have to settle at 125. Whereas if you say, I want $20 million, $150,000 sounds like a deal, right? So that's what they're doing, right? And they don't want anybody to hold them accountable. And it's like a gorilla charging. Or I was watching a documentary on the Smoky Mountains, and they're talking all about climate change and starting fires. And that was like a middle 10 minutes in the documentary. We fast forwarded. I was like, nope. But then it got to this scene that looked like, you know, in Jurassic Park where the Tyrannosaurus Rex is chasing the car, right? And you're like, whoa, that Tyrannosaurus is real close. But it's CGI, so the stakes are pretty low. There was a guy filming, I guess he had his phone out or something like that, and he was sitting in the bed of a truck. And he had jumped into the bed of the truck to escape an elk that was charging, because the elk was in heat, or the elk had been reintroduced into the Smoky Mountains in 2001. And so there's all these elk, and most of the year they're pretty benign, and they're like, hey buddy, whatever. And they'll just hang out and eat, and you can hang out, right? But for that part of the year when they're mating, holy effing crap, you've got to get out of their way, right? And they will eat you, like, and they're huge and they have antlers. So this guy's jumping on the truck, and the truck's pulling away as the elk is gaining on the guy. He's like, go faster, go faster, go faster. It was very funny, and I can't remember why I'm telling you the story. Hold on. I guess the courts kind of feel like that. That's probably why. I can't exactly remember why I was telling the story, but I feel like the courts feel like that, like you're just barely escaping. And they want you to feel like that. They want you to feel that kind of pressure. And the idea that you've just escaped and you've kept your life, right? And so you're not going to come back and rattle the cage of this terrifying elk. Like, it scared you enough that you're not going back there, right? And you're not going to come back and sue them and try and, you know, open this can of worms again. They're trying to close it for good. And is it going to work? I don't know. Tamara Litch, speaking of lawcraft and tying people up forever in legal proceedings. Tamara says, Dear Canada, as we head into day 41 of the longest mischief trial of all time, I just want to express my gratitude to all of you for your overwhelming support, your thoughtful and kind messages, and for your prayers. They mean more than you could ever fully know, and I appreciate all of you. Thanks to our legal teams who have been nothing short of outstanding, and to all of you supporters who continue to show up in court day after day. This political persecution has been a slog, to say the least. I'm getting tired, but the fight must and will continue. They likely thought I'd be some kind of shrinking violet, but they picked on the wrong Canadian prairie woman. Freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. Janis Joplin. I love you. And that's Tamara Litch. So the lawcraft isn't just reserved for the Coutts guys and the intimidation tactics. Right. I was saying it's like facing down a charging bear or something, and then I remembered the elk story. That's why I was talking about the elk. It is. They want to scare you and intimidate the crap out of you, and they're going to charge at you. And in the case of an elk, get in the car and drive. But in some cases, you can stand your ground and make sure that the charging animal. I mean, it's still a good idea to get out of the way and, like, you know, take the charging animal seriously, right? But the government is behaving like a charging animal, and the whole reason is to intimidate the crap out of you, so you're fearful of them. And that's not the agreement that we have with the government, or with the government, between the government and the governed. So that's annoying. Anyway, moving on to the grab bag of governance, because it is a robust grab bag of governance today with lots of interesting things. The invasion tabs are interesting today as well. Anyway, grab bag of governance. The Amish are being targeted. Is it? I thought we only had Mennonites. I thought the Amish were in, like, Pennsylvania and In Canada, we had mostly Mennonites. Apparently, in Chatsworth, there's an Amish community, according to Rebel News and according to Victoria. Victoria says, this is absolutely ridiculous. It blows my mind. Chatsworth and Densborough, Ontario Amish communities, this is happening now, liens on their properties by the Liberals, and that they didn't know they had until they applied for a farming loan. So liens on the property, no idea until they apply for a farming loan. Unbelievable stuff. Ezra Levent reports from Chatsworth, where the Trudeau Liberal bureaucrats have targeted an Amish community with massive punitive fines for failing to use the ArriveCan travel app. Maybe they were traveling to Pennsylvania Dutch country and they were like, we're not doing this ArriveCan thing. We're Amish. And here's $400,000 worth of fines. Rebel News says, Ontario's Amish community doesn't drive, use phones, or even electricity. Trudeau fined them $394,000 anyway for failing to download the ArriveCan app. When they didn't pay, Doug Ford slapped their families with their farms with liens. So that's pretty wild. A lien is just a debt against your property that you have to pay before you can do anything. So if you sell your property, the lien gets paid out first, I guess. So pretty wild stuff that the government's engaging in that. Doug Ford there isn't anybody to replace Doug Ford. Who's going to replace Doug Ford, right? Like the NDP, the Liberals? There isn't another conservative party. So yikes. Dan says, yeah, sure, David Eby wants to hear from us. You should do some research on him before you allow him to BS you. So David Eby's got you blocked. And he does block a lot of people. Rob Shaw says, new from David Eby calls on Victoria Fire Department to reverse the suspension of the firefighter who wrote him a letter. Quote, I'm glad he wrote to me. He should not face consequences for it. And if that's the reason he faces sanction, he should get an apology. So we'll see, I guess. I don't think Dave Eby means it, right? So, because he blocks constituents, and that's the play for all of the Canadian politicians. And I wonder why the government thinks that that's okay. And I wonder why citizens don't demand better. Here's the Bloc Québécois talking about, it says Bloc leader Blanchette says it's ridiculous how the CBC would get bonuses when they have all the tools, a massive budget, and no competition. I think most Canadians want to see CBC defunded and left to die. I know I do. What about you? Well, they don't serve the CBC doesn't serve the purpose. It's an expensive boondoggle, right? I like the cultural history of CBC. I think it's a, storied industry, but I mean, like the New York Times used to be a storied newspaper of truth and, hard-hitting journalism, and we solved all these problems. And now they're saying, anti-vaxxers are the real problem here. So the CBC has outlived its usefulness. It lived long enough to see itself become the villain. And now, I mean, yeah, like we need to get rid of it. We need to stop funding it. Polyev says, Holly Doan says, media under a conservative government must give up subsidies and rely on subscriptions, advertising, and sponsorships, as they did for centuries, says Pierre Polyev. When I was growing up, I remember watching TVO. I guess it was TVO. That used to be Channel 2. And then it was 12. It doesn't matter. But they used to do fundraising telethons, and they'd be like, oh, we've got the stars of, not Romper Room, Polka Dot Door, and all of these other places, all of these other shows, and they're fundraising. If you call in now, you can talk to them on the phone, and we need a pledge of $5 or whatever. This was like the thing to do, right? And PBS did it too, like the public, or I guess it was public broadcasting in the United States used to do it as well. All sorts of fundraising, and if you have a product, put a price on it and people will pay. And if your product is not worth the price, then people won't. And then you should figure that out, right? But like having us pay through taxes for a product like the CBC is bad policy that harms people. And like, we should not pay for it. It's that simple, right? And we should not pay 70% of wages for migrants just because that's the only way they'll get jobs. We shouldn't do that. We should stop importing the migrants, and we should stop the subsidies, and we should stop the cracked hiring practices, and we should stop the government working for foreign entities instead of the citizens of the country or the citizens of the province. And every single province, I can't even believe, like, it's been a year. It's been more than a year with this Chinese stuff. There hasn't been one province. Danielle Smith says, sovereign Alberta within a united Canada, but that's just for the carbon tax, basically. She's not saying I'm going to withhold everything until the federal government, like, we'll collect the federal taxes. We'll hold them in trust. We don't trust you as a federal government because there's Chinese traders in the federal government, and until the Chinese traders are removed, we're not playing this game. And if you choose to not listen, then we're going to go forward with removing ourselves from Confederation. Why is there no power in the provinces? Why are the provinces delegated to 5th, 6th, 10th fiddle, right? To experts in the federal realm. The experts in the federal realm have allowed Chinese traders to take control of our government, and now they're instituting censorship laws, and the provinces are sitting around talking about, we need money from the feds for healthcare. Are you kidding me? Like, what is happening here? They have power. They're not yielding. They're not using it. They're not doing anything to protect their citizens. And instead they're saying, the way we protect our citizens is to pay for healthcare for foreign people and also get them housing. And yes, it's correct that you live in a tent in a park. What? And there's nobody. Who are you going to replace Doug Ford with? There isn't anybody. Derek Sloan? I asked Derek Sloan, are you doing rallies? Are you doing any kind of events? Do you have a team? And he didn't respond to me. Maybe I'm not likable, I guess. It's possible. I'm very caustic. I'm very abrasive, I suppose. I've reached out to other parties as well. The Carriolases. Jim Carriolas, I guess, doesn't like me because I didn't call him back in time or something. I'm not sure. But I have questions for Jim Carriolas as well, because it seems like their party is a party of Jim Carriolas, right? Like, do they have more than, it's New Blue, right? And do they have more than just Jim and Belinda? I think it's Belinda, or no? Because you need actual structure. You need more than a wish list, right? And there are others as well. But are any of those people looking good? Does their system have any kind of following at all? It doesn't seem like it. So it doesn't seem like there's going to be many big changes because all of the politicians are in on the game. Eva Chipik says, important update. We're pleased to announce that the filing of the brief on behalf of the plaintiffs in the Alberta business class action. In the brief, we outline our reasons for seeking class action certification for the harms caused by the province's unlawful health orders. In essence, we stated that the shared damage inflicted by the province's unlawful health orders make the class action an essential mechanism for justice and systemic issue resolution. It also presents a unique opportunity to address the province's behavior in ways not possible outside of a class action process. Through the province's evidence, we uncovered information revealing a stark disparity in how COVID support funds were allocated between the public and private sectors. In 3 years, the province allocated $13 billion to the public sector. In comparison, the support extended to private business was only around $700 million, representing approximately 5% of the total funds. In the conclusion, we also emphasized that according to the Supreme Court, the responsibility of the legality of the and applicability of the laws lies with the government, not the citizens. The role of the courts as guardians of rights and enforcers of the rule of law is crucial to ensure that the government is held accountable for its actions and is essential for maintaining public trust. We urge all Albertans to read the brief and share it widely to raise awareness about these important issues. So, I mean, there is some kind of legal action being brought against government somewhere, in Alberta anyway, but is it going to materially mean anything at all? Or is it just going to kind of go away, right? I wish Eva luck. I hope it's very impactful. I hope it sets precedent across the country. But it seems like the government is in control. It's able to control the judges. It's able to put judges that it controls on important cases. It's able to sideline premiers who might want to have something to do with it, Danielle Smith. It's able to keep people in prison who've had a jury decision that they're not guilty. So, man, I feel like our justice system is completely cracked, and we need more tools than we've got to address this problem in Canada. Kian Bexty is talking about this. He says, Election Alberta has ruled that the NDP broke the law in order to artificially inflate their memberships prior to the election of incumbent leader Naheed Nenshi. So that's interesting. When I was talking about it, I was like, the obvious fraud is obvious. 60,000 people? Give me a break. Come on, guys. That's 3-4 times what the membership was. Wow. NDP, so counter signal, this is Kian's thing. NDP illegally inflated membership numbers prior to electing Nenshi. Elections Alberta has ruled that the NDP broke the law in order to artificially inflate their memberships prior to the election of incumbent leader Naheed Nenshi. The NDP have been forced into a binding agreement with the Elections Commissioner to abide by the law and quit misrepresenting their membership and fundraising numbers. So where'd the money come from? Who are all those members? And what were the real numbers for the leadership race? Might have to run that one again. Clayton says, police determined a tent fire at an immigration protest in PEI was not set by the government or racist Canadians, as protesters initially claimed. Investigators have ruled that the fire accidental. So it was an accidental fire started by these guys. Other people were saying these guys started it to try and blame the anti-immigration protesters, and then they were found out, and nobody was held accountable for that mistruth, right? Jeepers creepers. Lie. It's also known as a lie. Western Standard is reporting Danielle Smith's government confirms female-only sports policy after Olympic gender controversy. So that's good. In some ways, Danielle Smith does things that I agree with. In other ways, she seems to be selling out the country and allowing things to happen in Alberta that would have been unthinkable a decade ago, right? But after Notley, people think that this is, super good. And I just, I'm very skeptical, and it just seems like we're being sold down the garden path. Kabuki theater is convincing enough, and they're going where they want to go anyway, and it's where we don't want to go, but they know what's best. Also, this article, remember when Homer got charged or was publicly shamed for touching the babysitter's bottom when he dropped her off, but he was just getting the gummy Delilah that was stuck on her jeans. And then when he went on the Inside Edition, right, when he went on the TV show about it, and they froze the camera and they were like, "Mr. Simpson, stop approaching me." I tried to find the clip, but finding the Google foo to look up that actual clip in YouTube was difficult. It was the GIF. I was looking for the GIF, but it just seems like that. It looks like Danielle Smith is like, "Oh, Danielle Smith, stop getting angry. Stop getting closer to the camera. Oh no." Right. So it's interesting, the use of imagery, etc. It's good that Danielle Smith is doing this. I can't wait to see how they turn it on their head and throw somebody in prison for abiding by that law or by citing that law or something like that. It feels like there's another shoe to drop with it. So I'm cautiously optimistic, but Danielle Smith seems to be playing games. Ross McLean says, China says what? Mary Ng says electric vehicles are the future of clean transportation. That's incorrect. That's not right at all. Look into how lithium is mined. Look into how cobalt is mined. Look into our artisanal mines. Look up artisanal mines and Joe Rogan. And there's a guy who talks about the artisanal mines, and I can't remember his name, but there's a whole interlay of video of the artisanal mines, and artisanal mines just mean not traditional mining tools, meaning you dig with your hands to find the cobalt, right? And then they make electric batteries out of it. And we spend lots and lots of money on electric battery vehicles because they've sold it as a solution to a problem they created. The problem is bullshit. It's not a real problem. Okay. She is in line with that ideology that created this problem and is trying to sell the bullshit solution. See? So she's saying, Canada's positioned as a global leader in the growing EV sector. The only reason the sector is growing, I don't even think it's really growing anymore, but the only reason is because of government subsidy. And the positioning of Canada as a leader is only because of taxpayer dollars in the billions that were paid out to companies that are willing to take the risk and make these batteries. And oh, guess what? These batteries are already outdated. The technology is already outdated. The money was given years ago, and the battery's outdated. Also, the battery plants are employing people from South Korea, all sorts of other different places, Asian, India, and other places, instead of Canadians. And weird, because we spent $15 billion of taxpayer dollars on that, right? Now, a lot of places have global teams. A lot of companies have global teams. Rogers has call centers in India. Bell has call centers in India. There's all sorts of places with global teams. And that's one thing, I guess, right? You don't have to do business with a company that does that if you don't want to. That's fine. But I don't have a problem with it necessarily, right? Because a lot of these companies operate in multiple jurisdictions, and whatever, they can hire whoever they want to do whatever they want, right? Whatever. It seems like that's been allowed for a long time. I don't have a huge problem with it because whatever, run your business however you want, right? Most people do what's easy to run their business. So whatever, I don't have an issue with it. The issue I have is when you take $15 billion of taxpayer dollars and you funnel all of that into foreign people. What? That's our tax dollars. Like if you find out a company is doing, engaging in practices you don't like, you're like, I don't like this call center being in a different country. I'm going to change from Rogers and find a place that serves me in Canada. Great. Like you could do that. And that's great. Like you vote with your money. That's wonderful. That's a great way to send a message to people like that who you disagree with. Wonderful. You can't do that with tax dollars. You can't say like, I'm not paying these people's salary. Yes, you are. And we all are, because we have to, because these people tell us, and then they hide it under layers of bureaucracy, right? So like on one hand, do whatever you want to run your business. On the other hand, when it's my tax dollars, what the hell? I have every right to see an itemized itinerary of who you're hiring, how much the company is making, that taxpayers are subsidizing with these people, and so on and so forth. And it's a lot. It's way more than you'd think, right? And so it's unbelievable. So back to this. Mary says, at Cambridge College, we toured an electric vehicle battery lab to see the Canadian EV supply chain in action. Again, it's being forced down our throats. It's not legitimate. It's illegitimate. And well, I don't think the technology is mature enough to actually work. And so I think it's going to crash and burn. Like, every time they bring in plant-based burgers, why does the plant have to pretend to be meat, by the way, right? Like if the plant's so good to eat, be your own thing, plant. Don't try and pretend to be meat. Anyway, every time they bring in plant-based burgers, they fail, right? Despite everybody saying, oh, they're so good, everybody likes them, they sell so well, everybody likes them so much, and they're better than burgers for you, they're better for your heart, or they're better for this, or better for that. Bull poop. It's bull. It's absolute nonsense. And they don't sell, and people don't like them. And like, just because the hype is there doesn't mean it's actually true. That's what I think is going to happen to electric cars, even Tesla, right? Like, so anyway, let's move on to misappropriation and misuse of taxpayer dollars. Toronto Star is reporting irrelevant tweaks. Business group slams Trudeau government for minor changes to controversial capital gains tax increases. Polyev says incompetent Freeland has not only hiked taxes on small businesses, farmers, and home builders, she has created a rat's nest of new complex rules and exceptions to undo the political damage done to herself. We need to massively simplify taxes to spend less on accountants and bureaucrats and leave more for productive work and investments. And then they want people to sign this thing. And I'll remind you, as I usually do whenever we come across one of these, this is a way to bring you into their funnel to fundraise off you. You're not actually signing this to support bringing home a tax cut means you're going to fund the Conservative Party. They're going to use your email to fundraise off of you. They're going to say, hey, you want to fight this thing? We're going to fight this thing by doing XYZ. Give us $10 to do XYZ. That's all it is. Okay. You're not actually doing anything unless you want to do that. Fine. But you'll get a bunch of emails and phone calls from the Conservative Party asking for money. Trudeau Liberals and like the Hello everyone, thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful